So thank you everybody for coming back this afternoon. Talked a lot about loudness, multi-channel. Now, the content, right? Getting the content from even remote locations. So if everybody's not able to be in the same space, no problem. Patrick and Sam are going to talk a little bit about audio over IP, and Patrick Killianey and Sam Craig from ASG LLC and Patrick from AV Community. Patrick's going to start off with some slides about kind of setting up the structure of what they're going to talk about, and then we're going to go deeper into how to make that magic happen when people are, it's like that Looney Tunes cartoon map where they're all over. Yeah, that's what we're going to get into. So Patrick, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So, a lot of what I see at the event here, people are talking about cloud production and hybrid production, right? So you have an event where people are doing things on site, and you're trying to capture that and send it to remote audiences. A lot of people are trying to jump to the cloud production and say, oh, I can mix in the cloud. I can do, And one of the things that we want to point out is that if you're mixing in the cloud, that means your audio has to leave your venue, go out to the cloud where it's going to be mixed, and come back down. If people are going to hear themselves, getting to the cloud and back might be too much time. If you've done monitors for any kind of events, you probably know, like if you're dealing with musical talent, people are often trying to get down to like 5 or 10 milliseconds for their in-ear feeds. Even for presenters of just corporate content, a PowerPoint thing, something like we're doing here, you probably still want to keep it under about 15. The reason for that is that when people hear their voice coming back late, it becomes a distraction, or it can cause phasing problems, or it can do all of that kind of stuff. So keeping it down for the presenter is going to help them give a better event. They don't lose part of their brain trying to ignore this late signal that they're hearing. They'll be able to give a better event. Now, once you've got your audio on site for your presenter, you may as well do it for the audience as well. You don't want to interject too much here because your audience is used to seeing, like, if I'm 100 feet from the presenter, my brain knows I'm expecting the audio to come at a certain latency. Or if I'm 200 feet or whatever. But if you suddenly interject another 150 feet into that, people are going to say, like, gosh, this seems a little weird, right? I'm putting a lip sync problem on something live, and we don't want to do that. So for things that are on site, generally we say you want to have your DSP that's doing your mixing on site. Now, once you're dealing with people that are remote presenters, you can put it in the cloud. The latency requirements for that are usually much lower. In a little bit, I'll show you a musical environment where we have performers working together. They need to hear themselves instantly, but they can hear the next person 40, 50 milliseconds later. 25 milliseconds later, so 50 round trip. I should say it that way. Now, when you get to a conversation, the voice over IP industry used to say about 150 milliseconds was a good quality call. And now that we're into Zoom and Teams and things like that, they said, well, 150, how about we make it 150 one way? So 300 milliseconds, somewhere in that range, 150 to 300 is considered a good call. That's generally considered fast enough so that people don't start interrupting each other. I don't know if you've been on calls where two people start talking at the same time, and sometimes you get what we call the Canadian standoff. No, you go first. No, you go first, right? Everybody's super polite. So you can put that in the cloud as long as you keep those numbers down. And of course, the remote audience, if they're just watching your event, they're not interacting with it, you can have as much latency as you want. When I'm watching the World Series or the Super Bowl or something like that, I think I'm watching this live until I hear my neighbors cheer about 5 seconds before, right? I go like, hey, there's a little bit faster. So anyway, so that's kind of the idea. Now, so in these environments, you can definitely mix in the cloud. In these environments, you want the DSP on site. Does that mean the mix engineer has to be on site? No. A lot of mixers that we have today, you have the control surface, and separately, we have the mix engine and the mic preamps. So these are all separate boxes. This can be in one venue. This can be in another. We started with something like a simple switch. And then we said, maybe there's multiple switches in your venue because this is all network connected. And then over time, we said, I could put routers in between these and run it across a property, so long as I do like a VPN or something like that, or I keep them in the same layer 2 space. Once I've done that, I better start thinking about my audio and the bandwidth I'm going to need for that kind of thing. So your mix and your intercoms and things like that. And then once you've done that, frankly, how big could that space in between be? That's up to you.
Infinite.
You want to have a...
Nearly infinite, yeah. So Patrick, I'll step up here.
Go for it.
Taking a look at an environment such as this, control surface, DSP, preamps, everything's glued together in the middle. Now, when we say it's infinitely scalable, this is just a representation of the cloud. This could be public cloud, this could be private cloud, but this has been doable for quite a while now. What Patrick mentioned, a VPN tunnel right here. Let's say I wanted to do this inside of public cloud, for instance. Can anyone answer me, what would I do from a configuration standpoint to make all of this sing together? Any takers? It's actually very simple. You look at the switch and the router right here. You could buy a $130 off-the-shelf switch off of Amazon that supports BGP, do an IPsec VPN tunnel into the public cloud, learn all the routes, and now all of a sudden, I can start passing all of our signals through disparate environments. So much like what Patrick said, location doesn't really matter anymore. I could be a mixing engineer somewhere in the world, all of my tools living somewhere else, on-prem in public cloud, and I can start moving everything around. But latency is always our key. We'll always come back to that.
Right. So when we do this, here's an example of a system where somebody did remote mixing. It was when the pandemic hit, that's when people really started having to work on this, right? So there was a mix engineer that needed to be in an event in New Zealand, but he was in Australia. And you might remember Australia was becoming known for being very strict about their lockdown policy. You were not going to leave and go to the New Zealand and all this stuff. So he couldn't travel there. So he took his control surface, he connected to a DSP that was on site, did the broadcast mix remotely, and this was March of 2021 that they started talking about it. So it's something that's been going on for a little while. The next thing to consider is, do the mic preamps and the DSP have to be on the same property? No.
Nope.
You wanna...
Right there, just to keep painting this picture, this has all been doable for the past couple of years. Now, pandemic times really did spurn this type of development, but we've been doing active productions such as this for about 3 years now. Large scale, smaller scale, anything in between, it's all doable. So back to my example about using, let's say, public cloud. This could be just some switches, routers, some VPN tunnels in between. Now you get into the magic of, say, Dante Domain Manager, specifically Dante Connect, where I now need to overcome latency challenges. This is where we have a concept of a gateway. So a gateway is going to take signals from, say, virtual sound card, pipe it through a gateway, and I can start bouncing that across the world. Benchmark has always been, what, around 40 milliseconds or so?
Yeah,
down to about
the
10.
limit, yeah.
So we always want to take into consideration, what is our network lag? What's our cloud connectivity? How is everything singing to one another? But long story short, I could be mixing somewhere. I've got a cloud-based DSP. Now again, this is not back to in-person events because our latency is too much, but I can mix and match where all of these different tools reside. Even today at ASG, when we design and deploy our VPCR solutions, we have plenty of mixing engines that we can choose from. What services the customer best to tell their story? Where do they want it to live? Where do they want their operators to be? A lot of people don't have real estate anymore. That's been a very, very big topic of late. So how can I keep creating my stories, pushing it out to the audience, and I leverage our tools that combine best in breed class? Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that I'll mention is, so this is a physical thing. We want to be working on a physical control surface. Mic preamps are physical things you have to put on site. The DSP engine that a lot of mixer manufacturers have been working with, some of them basically are just a PC, right? Now, they've been building these things, and they usually say you're going to get this PC. You can't. It's not that you go out and buy it. They're saying you get this PC from us, and we control everything about it, and we can make sure that we're meeting our high standards for timing and all that kind of stuff. There are companies that are starting to look at, what if that DSP becomes an application that you can load on any computer, say in Amazon Cloud, or something like that, right? So now, all of a sudden, you could take this and connect all of these things together. This could live on your site, or it could live off in the cloud somewhere. It doesn't matter. And that is a crazy thing, because there is a project here that a year ago, ESPN did a total production in the cloud, mixing and everything. And funny story about this one, this was all supposed to be under non-disclosure agreement, but one of the companies involved, not the manufacturer, one of the other companies involved got really excited and went and told the press all about it. And then the manufacturer found out. So if you want to find out what's going on in R&D, give this one a read. It's a very interesting article. Honestly, if you're interested in doing these types of things, if you have an application for it, either company is looking for people who are interested in doing these types of productions. They're looking for the people that will actually give it a test. And they'll probably still require you to be on the hardware, but anyway, you can start splitting it up and they'll help you get there. You want me to go into the next thing, or?
Let's go into the next thing, yeah.
Okay, so if you want to get an idea of how a system would kind of come together, this is a project that I worked on about 2 years ago. So I was a trainer at AMX. I was a trainer at Audinate, and this gentleman came into the class. His name is Amit Peleg. He's a consultant. He works with the Blue Note Entertainment Group. And when we were talking about how to do connections and layer 3 networks and GPS clocks and all this kind of stuff that could really do the remote, the long distance connection, he realized this was the solution he was looking for. And so we did a pilot project where we took 3 different venues, 750 miles apart at the longest run, connected them, put musicians at them. So it's not conversational latency. We wanted musical latency so people could play together. So this is kind of how it all came together. We did 4 different events. Frankly, we could have made this longer than 750 miles, but we limited it to that because it was still during COVID, and we thought if we can't get on a plane, we want it to be drivable, right? But it's far enough that we're going to demonstrate the point. We did it on 1 gig fiber. It was actually MPLS connections you can get. These are affordable, at least at a commercial point, it's affordable fiber. And if you get them from the same telco, they will give you a performance guarantee between your locations. So it's kind of like having a private cloud, but you don't have to be responsible for it. You're outsourcing the private cloud. Anyways, and when we did this, we did it with audio and video, uncompressed audio. It was compressed video, but it broadcast quality. And so here's how we did it. As we said, you're going to want to mix on-site for every musician, all the performers, because they need to be able to hear themselves right away. So we had engineers on each site. By the way, they're also going to have to do this because somebody has to set up the microphones and somebody has to, actually do that. So somebody had to do it. But that person was responsible for lights, setting up the cameras, setting up the green screen, everything. So the local connections were done super low latency. But of course, the question became, how do we deal with these long distance connections? So what we did is we put a box here. These are boxes that Yamaha makes. It's a common concept we call a bridge. So it has 2 Dante ports on it. And you can configure those ports differently. So we could say, when you're receiving this long distance link, we're going to have a really long latency. I think our longest one in this was 14 milliseconds. And then when you're talking on the local network, super low latency. And now, by the way, this could also do splits, so we could send to each console or something like that separately. So that was all handy. So that's how we did it. Like I said, we actually have a webinar on this. You can hear me talk about it for an hour with the other people that did it. But we'll give you an example here. So one of the things you'll notice is the main facility was New York. We actually used the backdrop of the facility in New York, but we had the musicians in other locations on a green screen. when the musicians wanted to see the person, like this person would be positioned right here, so to their right. And so in order to make it so it felt natural for them, if they looked to the side to the screen, there was a camera pointing this way, they would see the person looking to them and vice versa. But that's how we got this type of effect where everybody looked like they were on stage together. The backdrop was New York. These people were in Washington, D.C., and these people were in Nashville. And you can kind of tell because we missed a little crop down here. We messed that up. But like I said, COVID times cut me some slack on that. But that's what we did. And eventually what happened, as people were starting to look to where they thought the musician was, it looked kind of nice on the screen. It looked like a normal concert. It was fun in that case. One of the interesting things that Amit wanted to do, though, in the middle of this, he dropped the green screens. So he said, you think they're all in the same place? Nuh-uh. And he dropped the green screens, and you could see like the background of where they were and all that kind of stuff. So that was an effect. But that meant like once we did that, we couldn't get the green screens back up very quickly. So we finished the rest of the concert with them down. Anyway, so that's when you start getting looks like this. But just so you get a feeling for what those performances were like, I've got a few of them you can hear. You ready?
The rushing eyes only go beyond
And actually what's funny in that clip, if you watch this on the webinar, so you can make sure your computer is giving you lip sync, there was a shot in there where our camera in New York was picking up the TV showing them Washington, D.C. That picture's camera was actually picking up the drummer in Nashville, and you could see how low latency the video was through the whole thing. I tell you, I have never seen lip sync that good in a stadium. And we did it across 750 miles, so it was pretty cool. Here's another example. So the interesting thing about this, there's no click tracks, there's no guide tracks, and no backing tracks. The video was all live. It wasn't added later, like everybody captured and then we did it in post. That was the live production that we're showing you there. I'd like to get a drummer and bass player to walk like that. Here you go. So one of the interesting things was we planned to interview the artists afterwards, but immediately when the show was over, we cut the feed, and then they started just kind of communicating among themselves, and they kind of talked about what they thought of it. Yeah.
The first time we really get to play, it's like this.
Virtually.
This shit, but it felt great and it looked on point.
Our first time rocking together?
Yeah, right? First time playing together, and it was together, pause. I'm curious from everybody on stage, how did y'all feel with the latency? Because I didn't feel much latency at all. Like I felt like normal.
Audio-wise, it felt great.
Audio,
It's killing.
I feel like it's hard to imagine that you guys aren't in the room right now.
Yeah,
personally.
It was. I mean, for us not all played together before, it was pretty good. Like you can imagine that this is a gig in front of a bunch of people, and I felt the same pressure as we were putting it together. Cause I'm like, what are we gonna do? Like,
It kind of feels like Colin was saying this earlier, like a live recording.
Yeah.
It's like
smoother. Live recordings take all day.
And so it's funny, this is just a live interaction with them. Have you ever had a Zoom call go that smoothly where people could just right with each other? Funny thing, when we set this up, we were on a Zoom call. That was our intercom while we were setting up the distance connection. And then we started getting the connection from different sites. And we were like, oh my God, what is going on? The Dante system is coming in slower than Zoom, like noticeably. And then it took us a minute to realize, like, no, I'm sorry. Every time we add another signal, we always assume it's later because I'm probably adding a delay effect or something to it. We're like, no, wait a minute. The Dante one is coming first. The Zoom one is that late. Oh, okay. So it was a bit trippy to get that. But yeah, everybody was just saying it was a completely natural conversation. And so that's sort of a short story of how this thing goes together. This is the type of thing that you could do across corporate networks. This is the type of thing you could do across fiber connections and things like that, and it'd be very effective. So that's my bit.
Yeah, but think about the time scales here. This was what, 2021? We're in the early start of 2024. The technology keeps improving that much more. We're on this huge upward shift where things are much more doable. We've talked about this all day at SUV today. We've got the technology, but how are we actually going to use it?
Yeah.
So if we keep in mind, the main point so far has been live performance, latency is key. But when you start branching out more into the streaming environment, the broadcast tier, that's where we start breaking out who is where, all the way down to our intercoms. I mean, this is all very basic. We've been doing cloud-based productions for a long time now, but how do I communicate with our staff? Well, great, Dante is a great way to transport, but there's another wealth of products out there that support all flavors of transport protocols. Whether it's wrapping things in SRT, I'm passing muxed signals through NDI. I now have mix minus going from intercom systems back over to vision switchers and audio mixers, all in public or private clouds. It's all about how we're doing this, but it also unlocks different business models. What we do at ASG all the time is, how do we guide people into their next storytelling experience? What are the best of breed tools to make that happen? So knowing that with the customer journey, we're able to pick from our collective toolbox and say, well, I think this type of workflow might function for it, but let's actually test it out. And so we've done this over and over again, make sure we're right-sizing solutions, but at the end of the day, it's all very doable, and we're seeing this day in, day out today. So I want to throw that out there. In terms of unlocking different business use cases, we've got a pretty large one right now, a topic that keeps getting brought up where, can I leverage upper tier talent, say my mixing engineers, that are not having to travel anymore? So back to pandemic times, how can I leverage all of my time much more efficiently? So now with these different cloud-based workflows, now you can have a kid at home, and I simply connect to DSPs on sites or cloud-based mixers, whatever it may be, but now I'm able to take on more and more shows, and I can teach the next generation to come up and use these tools just the same. So yeah. It's a fantastic world.
Yeah, so first of all, you could do multiple shows in a day. The one thing I just say is be careful. If anybody's ever mixed a house of worship, and at Christmas time you're doing 3-4 shows a day, and towards the end of the day you're a little punchy, and your ears are compressed, and or pressurized, or whatever we say. So the first show is pretty good, the second show is really good, the third show is getting pretty loud, and the fourth is totally out of control, right? So be careful of that. But yeah, there's touring companies that are starting to look at this and say, during the pandemic, a lot of people left the industry, right? Because the gig economy had stopped, and they had to find some other line of work. But we do still have the veteran mixers. So for the newer people going out, you could have the veteran mixer kind of check in with a number of different venues at the time at a given day. You could mix multiple shows. You could have somebody who doesn't have to travel anymore, so you don't have to send out as many trucks and things like that. As long as you can ship the content back to their venue or to the cloud that they're controlling, you reduce your travel costs significantly. When I worked at Yamaha, we actually had one of those trucks. It was the big trailer, and it had the things that all expand like a control room like that. And the biggest expense on that thing was keeping the hydraulics working and the air conditioning working on it. It wasn't keeping the equipment. The equipment was fine to travel. But oh my gosh, keeping those trucks going was a nightmare. And some of it was because it would be transported by a truck driver who didn't know how to level the trailer once it got on site. Or it would be something simple like that. These are not the things you're thinking about when you're designing these facilities, but over time it starts to bite you. So yeah, cloud production, remote production, this is something that you're probably going to see a lot more of, especially at the higher end of the market, and then it will start working its way down.
So I'll jump in for a quick second, the voice from the corner. So Sam, when you guys are putting things like this together, I got to imagine that's kind of the price consideration, right? It's that upfront, but the amortized savings, because you're not sending trucks, because you're not flying talent, that must kind of realize itself out pretty fast, right?
Yes, leveling out over time is the big key here, because yes, it can be a very immense upfront cost, depending on what your use case is, but you think about the savings you get over time into telling these stories. So it's all doable. We have the technology. Just got to make it work.
Keep turning it off. I'm hitting the mute button out of panic because I'm so close to the speaker. We have 4 minutes. Questions in the room. Oh, here we go. If I don't go face first.
So what happens when you have a network glitch, you have a live audience, and you get nothing coming back? What's the fallback?
So that's one of the reasons why remote mixing is somewhat helpful. So if that's a concern, you can do the remote mixing and then it's on site and it's not going anywhere else. It's in your local building. If the remote mixer lost control, everything would keep mixing exactly as they left it. What some companies do is they have dual console functionality. So they have their DSP. So you could have a console on site that somebody could jump on and sort of pick up from where that person left off until they can get reestablished. The discussion of redundancies is one of those, how much redundancy do you want? I could talk about that for a half an hour. But yeah, that's usually one of those things that we do at that point. Just like if it's really that critical of a system, you might have redundant engines. So if this engine fails, the other one takes over. There would be a second mixed position that somebody else could pick up and keep going.
Question, maybe I missed this at the beginning, but what was the plan? How did you synchronize the systems? What were the sync sources at each location?
Okay, so GPS clocking is the common solution. So the same GPS you use for your navigation in your car, basically the way that works, all the satellites are sending pulses down, and based on the arrival times, right, you figure out your location. What they're sending down is a timestamp. So we can, anywhere in the world, get a time reference from GPS that is very, very tight. And then we can turn that into precision time protocol onto the network, which is what all our systems use.
Do you know what device they use?
I do. It was... nope. It was Sonifex.
Follow up. So in which...
Actually, I will tell you, the hard part of it was the stage in New York was 2 stories underground, so getting access to the sky was a difficult thing. Actually, he snuck it up over an awning on the building. He moved the clock up higher because the antenna wire is the one that had to be short, right? Once it's on a network, we can make that longer.
So you picked one of the facilities to be the grandmaster, and you set up priorities around for failovers?
So each location has their own GPS clock.
Right.
And then everybody follows the GPS clock that's closest to them.
Sure.
And then, the audio just gets sent from that point out.
And if the GPS failure occurs, and what's the failure back over when there's a cloud and you don't get the GPS?
I guess the question is what is failing? It's not the GPS satellite, so you're worried about the GPS clock box in the space.
Receiver.
Realistically, we know that this was a Dante system, so we know devices could freewheel for a while.
Sure.
At least minutes.
Is that out to PTP v1?
That is. No, here it was PTP version 2 because we had the GPS clock.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We did have some devices that were boundary clocking to PTP1, but it was just about everything was PTP2.
Awesome. And you guys nailed the post. We're at 20 seconds. Fantastic. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you all.
Thank you.